Whitetail Rendezvous host Bruce Hutcheon welcomes you to episode number 130.
Welcome to Whitetail Rendezvous Podcast, where it is all about whitetail deer hunting tips, techniques, and the stories so you can become a more successful whitetail deer hunter. And now your host, Bruce Hutcheon.
Shelly Grandstaff and her husband Mike started Whitetail Stalker on Facebook, and they have created a 10-member team across the Midwest. They help their readers with tips, techniques, and strategies for being successful at hunting whitetail deer. Welcome to another exciting edition of Whitetail Rendezvous. This is Bruce Hutcheon, your host. And we're heading out to Iowa today, and we're going to visit with Shelly Grandstaff. Shelly and her husband Mike have a company and a crew called Whitetail Stalker. And so, Shelly, welcome to the show.
Hi, good to be on.
Let's start right off. Let's talk about yours and Mike's group and business, Whitetail Stalker. Tell us about that.
Okay, well, last year in September, Mike decided that he was going to start up a page called Whitetail Stalker, and he was posting mainly on this Facebook page big deer. He knew that people love to see big deer, and we like to look at big deer, and so he saw that this page was really taking off and started thinking about doing a team, and decided he was going to put some people on, and that's kind of how it started. We started out Whitetail Stalker just by an idea of people like to see deer.
Thank you for that. Tell me about your team. Who makes it up, and are they just in Iowa, or are they in different states?
Nope, we have quite a few people. I think we're at 10. We have them kind of stand out between Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, here in Iowa. We also have Missouri. Like I say, I think there's about 10 of us now. Got a couple of us girls on the team too. It's not just the guys. And we hunt everything from, whitetail deer to coyote to I think a couple of the guys have thought about going on a bear hunt, and so just anything that we can go out and do. We do turkeys and everything as well.
No, in the warm-up, you mentioned that you're going to be on the Pursuit channel. How did that come about?
Well, the Pursuit channel has a show that is called The Search, Generation X is what I believe the full correct name of it is. And they were advertising for teams to come onto the show and compete. It's almost like an American Idol type of thing, where different teams go onto this show and they submit their hunting video, and the viewers vote on who they like the most, and whoever gets the most votes wins the competition that the Pursuit channel is putting on. And so
what's the prize?
My understanding is you get your own television show. So Wait a minute. Your own show, and they're going to fund it? I think, or portions of it. I'm not sure of all the details with it, but Mike kind of handles most of that. I just go out and I get the deer. So.
That a girl?
Yeah.
Well, that sounds exciting. Now, let's slow down here, Bruce. Now, have you already submitted your video for this year?
Yes. Yep, we have all of our video in that's required. I think we have to have in 5 or 6 videos and then a best of video, and we have all of ours submitted in.
And how long are these videos, each one of them?
They have to be 5 minutes. So it's kind of editing down a bit, but you still get the feel of what happened out there with the hunt.
Wow. Do you know Gary Gillette with Hunting Film Tour?
I personally do not. I have a feeling my husband probably does, though.
Okay, and just make a note after the show. Gary has been on Whitetail Rendezvous. Had him a guest a month or so ago, and he has a company that goes around North America built on short video clips. Now, I think his are 8 to 10 minutes. but he has a collection of that, and it's all about the outdoors. Could be fly fishing, could be kayaking, could be muzzleloader hunting, archery hunting, but he incorporates that. It's kind of like what was that Warren Miller films about the skiing? Mm-hmm. You ever remember that or ever see that show?
I'm not sure if I have or not, to be honest with you.
Okay, but that's the concept, and basically that was a September, October, November show where Warren Miller would film all around the world and bring, an hour and a half worth of skiing in all different places to the film, and just go from, school to school and theater to theater, and it was really fun. So remember that hunting film tour, because if you have that content, and I don't know how the voting's going to come out, but you might think about that if you're into doing video shows. Perfect.
Thank you.
Well, you're welcome. So that's the Pursuit channel, and you said it's going to be on in January. It's going to air. Do you know what channel?
Whatever you have, whether dish or direct, it's going to be Pursuit channel. I'm not sure of what the actual channel is with dish, but.
Now let's switch gears now, and let's talk, before we talk about your first deer, which is why Mike wanted you to be on the show, and I get excited about having you on your show, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But let's talk about the hunting tradition for Shelly and how that came about.
Okay. Well, growing up, I was never exposed to hunting. I had no interest in hunting. I thought poor Bambi, to be honest with you. And, my dad, he would pheasant hunt, but I never went with him. And then I met Mike. And when him and I met, it was a very short dating relationship. We dated for about 3 months, and then we got married. So, and he lived out in Indiana, and I lived out here in Iowa. And so when I moved out to Indiana, I had never seen the house that I was going to live in. And just so everybody knows, we've been married 11 years. It's all worked out, and we're good for such a short relationship. But,
well, I'm happy about that. Hallelujah
yeah.
On that.
Yeah. But I go out there, and I go into the house, and I walk into the living room, and here's 4 deer heads looking at me hanging on the wall, and it kind of creeps me out at first. I didn't know what to think of all of it. And then I go into another room, and there's 2 more heads hanging on the wall, and another head hanging on the wall somewhere else. And I knew he was a deer hunter. Obviously, we'd kind of established the things we like and what we enjoy to do, but seeing it kind of firsthand, I was taken back by it. And so he wanted to take me out that first hunting season to, get me introduced to all of it. And so we got married in June, so hunting season was coming up, shortly after that. And so I think it was opening day of gun season out in Indiana that we went out. And we went out, and I think I saw everything imaginable that could happen with deer. I had 11 does come underneath our stand, and I was just sitting there watching everything. But 11 does come underneath the stand. I had bucks sparring out in the field, a buck mating with a doe, everything you could just imagine. And it was just amazing to see it, and the peace and the quiet and sitting in the tree and just the crunching noise of the deer. And I just was instantly hooked from that point. And then,
how old were you at that time, if I may ask?
I was 18. So, yeah.
And so no prior hunting experience at all in your life, and then you meet the guy of your life, and all of a sudden you're sitting in the tree stand, and just your eyes are open.
Yeah, definitely. I remember sitting in school, and some of the boys in my class would come in with camo on, and I remember thinking, oh, that's awful, hideous. Why would they wear that? And now I wear it, so it's not that bad.
Well, no, and there's a number of companies, of which one of the main companies that I'm very familiar with is Proas, Kersey's Pike Company, and she's made it very easy for women to buy clothing, outdoor clothing, camouflage clothing that are fit to your shapes.
Oh, good.
And I don't know what brands you wear now.
Under Armour is what I wear right now with Realtree.
And they have women cut apparel.
Okay.
Do they?
Yeah, they do.
Okay.
Yep.
So there you are, sitting in a tree. You got hooked. Now, how did you decide that? Yeah, you want to pull the trigger or let go of the release? Tell us about how that happened. Well,
after that, Mike started taking me to the shooting range with him, and at that point, he was shooting, a muzzle loader, and so he had me start shooting with him, and I really liked it. And then I forget because it's been so long now, but we went out one day and I sat there and, I was just ready. I was ready to do it. And then there was one particular day, I think it may have been that year or the next year, but he sat up in a tree stand and I just decided to sit on the ground and get kind of nestled up into the woods. And I fell asleep sitting on the ground, and I look up and I look over to the left of me, and there is just this huge buck. It was the biggest thing I'd ever seen. And I pull up, and, I'm just kind of been halfway asleep sitting there, and so I'm kind of getting startled, and then the buck fever is just kicking in. And because this is my first time ever pulling up at a deer and putting the crosshairs on it, everything. And I shot and just was a total wreck, buck fever, and of course I missed it, didn't find it, nothing. So I was glad that I at least missed it and didn't hit it and, hurt it and, it had to suffer. But that was my first time ever actually shooting at a deer, and it was just amazing and crazy and scary all at once.
Now, if you can, in your own words, because we have lady listeners and guy listeners that never had hunting in their life, but they've heard about it, friends have talked about it, and now they want to experience that. What led up to you being able to just take that shot? Walk us through the practice hours and the woodcraft that you had to learn so you could sit that still and have a buck within 50 yards, 60 yards, or was it closer?
Probably 50 yards, I'd say.
So talk us through it. How did you get to that point?
Well, a lot of it was honestly, like I say, going to the shooting range with Mike, getting comfortable with the gun, learning about the safety of the gun and how to operate it and everything. And then honestly, Mike and I watched a lot of deer hunting shows on television, and seeing a deer and seeing how somebody watches it come in and how to wait for it to step forward to open it up. And just there was so much that I was absorbing by just watching these hunting shows. And as Mike was trying to explain to me, to start getting used to, even though it's got a rack and it may be big, just try not to get the buck fever and just take your time and, as much as you possibly can. And so it was a lot of watching that and getting the exposure and going out and seeing in the woods and being exposed to the deer. And like I said, I think this particular first shot came the year after, and I think I had enough exposure of sitting out in the woods and seeing deer come in, seeing little deer and, does come in that I wasn't going to shoot at, and being used to that. And so when you see the big one, you're like, okay, I'm ready. But being the first time to ever shoot at an animal, yeah, I got buck fever. Big time. So,
what about scent control? Talk to us about that.
Well, we used to use Scent Away for a lot of years. It was a great product. Now we use Upwind. That is one of our sponsors, and So we're very big on scent control. Sometimes I think Mike gets really frustrated with me because I like to burn candles in the fall and I wear perfume during the week, and I think it irritates him sometimes with the scent. But other than that, when we leave the house, I mean, our clothes are in a separate room, in a tote. They're kept away from, anything in the house. I mean, sometimes we let them sit outside to air out. When we get out to the woods, if not beforehand, we will spray down with our scent away or with our upwind. Now, like I say, it's upwind, but with our scent away sprays. And, we spray it all over. If we have bags, we spray the bags. We spray the bottom of our shoes, my hair. We also use it, spray like the face. We also, before we go out hunting, we also shower with a scent away cover. So we do practice it quite a bit.
Now, do you wear rubber boots?
Yes, muck boots are what I wear.
Okay. Most people, I went to school in lacrosse, and for no other better reason, lacrosse, I've had lacrosse boots forever, and they work for me. Muck boots are very popular, as well as some other brands, but I found that very important. And you mentioned something very important. Always spray the bottom of your boots.
Right.
The last thing you do, and that's we do if I'm hunting with a buddy before we leave the truck, we spray each other's bottom. If not, then I sit on the tailgate and make sure I spray the bottom of the boots, and that's very important because it'll be transferred, even though they're quote unquote the rubber scent free. Any foreign scent can attach itself, and you don't want that to happen.
Right. Yep, we always spray the bottom of our boots. That's probably one of the biggest things. And then the only other thing we would spray the bottom of our boot with would be if we had any kind of deer attractant scent that we use or anything like that. Just maybe sometimes we've done that before, like walking in to pretend like we're bow walking. So.
Now, do you use scent drags when you're walking to your stand, especially during the rut?
We actually did this year. That was the first time I'd ever seen Mike use that. So we have done that.
How did that work?
That particular evening, I think we did have 3 bucks come out. They weren't big enough to shoot at, but we did have some bucks come out.
Yeah, and listeners, if you haven't tried that, it's not all that difficult. The most important thing is that keep your scent drag in a separate plastic bag and apply scent just before you go out. Don't apply it at the home because you want that as fresh as you can. And you'd be very surprised what may happen if it's at the right time during the rut, because you can pull them in on a string. And the other thing I like, you can circle your stand, play the wind, and then you can take the scent drag and set it up where you want to draw the buck through a shooting lane. And we hopefully in another show we can talk about that. But you can actually set the buck up and for that. So that's something to remember in future hunts, because scent drags do work. You have to do it correctly, like anything we do. So you shot a buck with a muzzleloader, or you missed a buck with a muzzleloader. Is that correct?
I missed it.
Now, you went from muzzleloader. Did you go into archery or shotgun or rifle then? Or tell me what happened next. Well,
so did the muzzleloader with the deer, and then there was, I think the season out there, it was springtime. Mike had me go out and do some squirrel hunting with a 22. So that was fun. I got a squirrel that year. And then eventually Mike was already into all the archery and everything. And then eventually we just decided that it was time for me to get a bow. I was really interested in it. And then we went up to Bass Pro, and I got my first bow. I think that was probably in 2006 or 2007, I think.
So let's roll right into your first deer came in 2015 and it went out on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. I think Mike put it all the way around the world.
Yeah. Yeah, he did. He was definitely proud that day. So
he was a very proud, and I think you should be proud because you're part of the fastest growing segment in the outdoors, and that's women in hunting. And to accomplish what you did without the long hunting experiences is something incredible. So let's talk about your first deer.
Well, oh goodness. Well, I had gone out only one other time this year. Well, kind of backtracking here. I got pregnant in 2010, and it was right around hunting season, so I didn't go out in 2010. And then my dad, unfortunately, had passed away in 2011, and so that's actually what brought us out to Iowa. I'm an only child, so it was to help my mom out. And so that's how we transitioned from Indiana to Iowa. And so getting out here is different. Out in Indiana, I didn't have to take hunter's ed. I met the age requirement. Out in Iowa, I think it's sometime in like 71 or 72. And so I didn't meet the age requirement, so I had to take hunter's ed. Well, getting out here, getting reestablished in a home and having a little baby and a little girl, and I didn't get to do hunter's ed quite as fast as I wanted to. So I actually took my hunter's ed this year. And so I finally got to go out this year. So there's quite a bit of a gap of not being able to hunt. And so I was ready. And so I went out, I think 1 or 2 days with Mike at the beginning of archery, and we saw some deer and, saw some bucks, but I'm kind of picky about my deer. I like to manage the deer. I don't want to shoot little bucks. I don't want to shoot young does. I've always been very adamant about that. And so, when I finally got the opportunity to go back out again, which was, I think it was November 7th or 8th is when I got to go back out. And, we went out in the morning and we saw some really, really, really nice bucks up on the field line. They were just, way, way, way too far, and they weren't coming in. They were on does, and they weren't leaving those girls. And so the setup we had was, we have a deer decoy by Primos that is the scarfish one, but when we take the rack off of it, I like to call her Scarletta. And so we had Scarletta set up out there, and she was probably about 30 yards away from where I was up in the tree in a tree stand, and Mike was next to me, and he was filming because we were filming for the Pursuit channel that we're going to be on. And then we had a little buck come in, not much more movement, and so we ended up actually getting out of the tree stand and took a little bit of a break, and then we came back. I think it was about 2:30, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and we got back up there, and I don't think we saw anything, and we might have seen a little buck come through if I remember right, and then Mike was to the right of me in the tree, and I was in the left tree. And he says to me, get your bow. There's a buck, and I cannot see this buck. And I'm looking, and I'm trying not to move. That's the one thing Mike has taught me is to sit perfectly still as much as you can in the tree, because the bucks, you may not see them, but they will stand there, and they will watch you, and they will not move, and they'll wait for you to move and bust you. And so I was trying to find where this buck was, and then I finally peeked around enough and I could see him, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is it. This deer is, I think, big enough. He's past his ears. He was a little bit younger, I think, than what I was anticipating, but at the time he looked great on the hoof. Like I say, he was past his ears. He was tall. And so I sat there and kind of watched him. He was on the other side of the creek, and he actually turned like he was going to walk away. And then he hopped the creek, and at this point, I was trying to pull back, and I wear a safety harness, and as I'm sure a lot of people have this problem, but you need to wear a safety harness, you pull back, and sometimes those straps can get in the way, or the tree's right there, and you're trying to get pulled back. And so the first pullback I was having difficulty, but then he started to come out, and I just yanked it back and got up on him, and he was about 14 yards away, and he was quartered to me, and I just put the pin on him, and I waited until he stepped forward and took a deep breath and took my shot, and it was like there was no buck fever leading up into the shot. It was right when I released that I just turned to jello. And so he ran off, but we could still see him, and he just stood there looking around the area, and then he walked a little bit, and he stood at this point, he's probably about 60 yards from us, and he's just standing there watching. And when I shot him, I heard the thud, so I know I hit him. And when I was watching him through the trees, his eyes were, squinting, and he acted like he was hurt. And then at this point, this huge buck with 5 does was coming out on the upper field, coming down towards us, and we thought Mike was actually going to get to take a shot at this buck because they were coming right for a scarletta, and we thought we were going to double team up on deer that night. But the buck, he was just not having it with that scarletta. She must not have, I guess, turned him on enough to come in close enough. So that was how the shot happened. So.
And did you see the buck tip over or drop?
No, we actually, Mike and I, that was probably at about, I want to say about maybe 5 o'clock when that shot happened. And so we got out of the tree after dark because we always wait until all the deer have cleared the field and, there's no signs of deer anywhere. And if you have to sit and wait until it's pitch black, you have to. And so we finally got out of the tree, and it was absolutely killing me because my arrow's sitting there in the ground, and, my knocks all lit up and everything, and it was torture. And so we got down and looked at the arrow, and it was covered in blood pretty well. And so Mike, he just had a feeling that it was a gut shot. And so we went home, and our hunting property is not far from where our house is. And so we went home, and we watched the playback of the video, and it was a high gut shot. And so Mike had recommended at this point that we not go and push the deer, just give it some time and let it expire. And so that was a night of no sleep. We'll just put it that way. It was awful.
Understood. So what happened? Tell us about the recovery.
Well, so we decided we would go out at 9 o'clock in the morning the next day. And so we knew the deer would be out of the field by then. We didn't want to booger up our hunting area. And so we got there, and we walked back to where the arrow was when we found it. And there was a frost that morning, and so I was concerned that any blood was going to get washed away. I mean, I wanted to find this deer. And so all I had to look at was just this little speck of blood where the arrow was, besides the arrow being covered. And so we started to walk over to where the deer had been standing those 2 times for, 15 minutes, 10 minutes each time. And there was no blood. We thought for sure maybe blood was running down its, side, maybe dripping off of its belly, something. Nothing, not a speck of blood anywhere. And so we branched off. Mike went looking one way and I went another. And he had suggested, walking the field line. And so I was walking the field line, and I didn't see it. I didn't see any blood. And so having tracked deer with Mike before, one of the things he'd explained to me was, think of what a deer would do. Think of how a deer would walk or go, what path they would take. Would they jump? Would they, depending on your shot. And so I decided I went back to the spot where I shot the deer, and I just walked it thinking if I was a deer, where would I go? And so then I got to the spot where the last time I saw it standing. And that was where you had to try and determine, looking at the woods, because at this point it would have went into the woods, what was the easiest path that it was going to take because it's injured. And having seen it squinting its eyes and seeming like it was in pain, I knew this deer was probably not going to be jumping or taking, ridges that are steeper. And so I took this certain path and walked it, still not seeing any blood anywhere. And then Mike was across this creek bed, and he says to me, hey, I'm not seeing anything over here. Do you see anything? And I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, God, just let me have one speck of blood just so I know that this deer has, it's got something going on with it. And it was literally probably 30 seconds later, I looked down and I find a speck of blood on a leaf. So if that's not divine intervention, by God, I don't know what else it is, because it was just the tiniest speck of blood on a leaf. And so I looked up and I thought, well, there's this little, I think it's the start of the creek is what it is right there. And there was an obvious deer path going. And I thought, well, I bet you he probably hopped over there, maybe trying to go find water or something. And so I was getting ready to hop the creek. And right when I looked up to hop, I saw white and I saw him. He was laying there. And so I literally probably would have jumped and landed on him if I would have crossed. And I just freaked out and was yelling. So any idea we had of keeping deer, keeping the deer good and waiting all that time to keep our property from getting boogered up, that probably didn't happen because I was screaming so loud and excited. So, but, I walked over, got him, and he, I think, had expired actually a few hours after I shot him because he was pretty stiff. So we could have went out sooner and I could have had a better night's sleep, I think.
Now, where did you actually hit him when you got to him?
Yeah, it was a high gut shot. It ended up being higher up on him.
So let's just share and put a period on this segment. How long did you search for that deer?
Oh, I'm trying to think. Hour and a half.
And how far from the time you shot him from your tree stand to where you covered? How many yards?
100, 120.
And listeners, that's what it takes. And obviously, Mike has learned a lot of great lessons and has transferred them to Shelly. But when they realized that where they had hit him, the arrow went through him, so they knew the broad had to do its work, but you just had to let time, happen. And you couldn't push the deer. If you pushed the deer, there's no telling where that deer would have gone, get on somebody else's property or whatever. So lessons learned is, when you have a shot like that or any shot, give it time. If you can't see it dead in the field or you can't see it from your tree stand that night, just leave it. Mm-hmm. It's not going anyplace. And those are lessons learned. And Shelly, I'm just excited, and I'm so excited that, we're well past our stop date, but this will be a great show. So I want you to take a moment now and talk about your sponsors, tell people where they can find you on Facebook. If they're interested in Whitetail Stalker, how to get hold of you. If you have a web page, tell us about that.
Sure. Yeah, we definitely have a lot of great sponsors. I wish I had my list in front of me to list them all. We really do. But, from natural camel roll-on face paint, we use that. We use, like I had said earlier, the Upland. We have Black Eagle Arrows as our sponsor. We also do the Flying Arrow Archery, and what I used this year that definitely tore that deer up for me, and I think helped with, the harvest was the toxic broadheads. So that is what I use. Oh my gosh, Track Grabber, that is a product that we use if you were to get stuck out in the field. It's always in our vehicle to help us. I mean, it just ranges from different sponsors and that we have. I mean, I'm drawing a blank here on all of them, and I apologize to our sponsors if I'm not listening, y'all. But
that's good. They'll forgive you. Now talk about your website and where to find you on Facebook.
Sure. So we do have our Facebook page, which is Whitetail Stalker. It's not sometimes people think it's the Whitetail Stalker, but Whitetail Stalker on Facebook. And then each team member of our team has their own public figure page. And so if you look up Shelly, it's under Shelly Grandstaff /Whitetail Stalker. And that is my public figure page. That's the best way to follow along with me in any hunting. And I hope you guys do, because we're actually watching a huge buck right now that we call Bully on our trail cams. And I'm hoping to get it done in muzzleloader, because out in Iowa you can take 2 bucks, which is great.
Well, that's exciting. And, we had a great conversation with a lady today that didn't begin hunting until she was married to Mike, and her stories that could go on and on about how she's learned how to be a woman in the outdoors and how to harvest her own deer with a bow, and that's a feat in and of itself. Archery hunting is tough, and Shelly Grandstaff, thank you so much for being a guest on Whitetail Rendezvous.
Yeah, not a problem. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
As your host at Whitetail Rendezvous, I want to thank each and every one of you for spending your time with us today. I look forward to sharing with you in the next episode more whitetail hunting tips, techniques, and stories. Until then, keep the sun at your back, the wind in your face, and always be patient.
If you have any tips, comments, or suggestions, or what we can do to improve, because we're here to serve you, let us know. Thanks for listening to Whitetail Rendezvous Podcast at www.whitetailrendezvous.com.